Hi, welcome to the Drama Free Living podcast. Lisa, did you know that Gallup did a survey and they found that 75% of workers voluntarily leave their job because people don't allow casual Friday?
Is that true?
No, really what's true is that 75% of workers who voluntarily leave their job, they do so because the company didn't provide snacks in the break room.
Is that true?
No. Okay, so here's the reality, okay? And here's what's interesting is we try to solve some of these outside things without almost like solving the core problem. So here's really what they found, right? 75% of workers voluntarily leave their jobs, do so because of their boss, not the position in the company themselves.
They
right?
leave it because their boss.
Right, because
maybe their direct boss,
report,
not necessarily
right?
the CEO, but their direct manager.
Yeah, and here's what's interesting is that a lot of times, like we think about this retention and how to really unlock true employee loyalty, and we focus on all of these externals.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to provide this benefit and that. And listen, provide them all day long, right? As many as you can. I'm all for that, but it sometimes doesn't solve like that core problem.
Yeah.
And many times when we have organizations that we work with that maybe have a retention issue, and we come in to deliver this workshop about how to engage employee loyalty. This is a very popular workshop that we do. And we're going to give you a little bit of behind the scenes of some things that we cover, but they don't really kind of cover the core issue. Right. And it's really some things like people leaving managers. It's like this idea of a lack of trust.
Yeah.
Right. If I don't believe that the person that's leading me has my best interest at heart, right? I ask this in workshops at times, but Lisa, we think about the best leaders that we've ever had, or a great coach, or a great boss, or a great mentor. The question I always ask is like, well, were they more concerned about who you were becoming or what you were doing? And almost across the board, it's who I was becoming. I think about the people that have impacted me the most. Yes, it was at times I got to do this and this and this, but they were more focused on helping me become. It's like that transformation. And I think transformation creates true loyalty. Right? When you feel a sense of loyalty, Lisa, and I even think about this idea is that even during the COVID pandemic, there was somebody that really transformed us. And even during the COVID, they died, during that time. And we put on our mask and got on an airplane and flew to Oklahoma because we were going to be a part of that service.
Right.
Right. Because that person helped transform us and helped us become somebody. And, those are the things that you can't buy. Right? Loyalty is something you earn. You can't buy loyalty. Right? I can buy your time, but I can't buy your heart. I can, in essence, buy your hands, but I can't buy your heart. And I think thinking about like managers, it's like, how do I get people's hearts? And here's a great question a lot of times that we always ask when there's a retention issue at certain organizations is, we always go back to the managers and go, okay, what could you have done different?
Right. And this, what's really interesting, this reminds me of a lady that we know, and she was a Navy pilot.
Oh, yeah.
She was a Navy pilot on an aircraft carrier. And so she had her, she served two different terms or two different commanders. She had one commander at one time and another commander at another time. And the one commander was just very, very difficult. Okay, so we're talking Navy pilot.
Combat pilots.
Combat pilots. We're talking commanders of aircraft. They're all going to be tough. You think of somebody in that position, you don't get to that position by being soft and a teddy bear, right? Yeah. But there's one that was just very harsh, very hard. Somebody was having an issue and it was, my way or the highway, just no leniency, did not listen. And you're on the aircraft carrier for like 6 months and maybe you've got a family member that's dying or you have a baby that's being born. And there was no acceptance of humanity.
Yeah,
and you can't, you're there, you can't leave, but you do have other stuff going on at home. Well, and so then the other commander was also just as successful, also just as strict by the rules, but had a compassion for the pilots and the crew. And when someone was having a baby born, there was hey, congratulations, tell me about your baby. Let me see pictures of your new wife, and just a lot more recognition of humanity and celebrating and being sorrowful. And Dennis, what did she say? She said the turnover rate under the manager that didn't have
It was like over
any
50%.
no, I think it was like 70%.
Yeah, it was huge.
A 70% greater turnover rate with this commander that was not there for the people and for the servicemen and women than the commander that actually like cared what was going on in their lives. And that kind of hit me really hard because we're talking these are tough cookies. You don't do this for a career because you want a cushy job.
Yeah.
But yet at the same time, you can be compassionate and you can care about people and still be a pretty strong individual.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Lisa, it's this idea that people want to be understood.
And that's the example of people leaving their managers.
Yeah.
Those servicemen and women, they left that commander.
Yeah.
Not because they hated their job, but because that commander just didn't recognize, them in their humanity and what they were going through.
And really understanding, I think, as, if you're managing people, really to kind of understand people and realize that they have goals, they have dreams, they have aspirations. And it's not always about the organization. And sort of the best leaders are this, they have this ability to take the organizational goals and personal goals and kind of start to align them closer and closer and closer together. Right. And it's this idea of like, hey, how can I help serve you? Because service is the way to people's hearts. Mm-hmm. Right. So as managers, if we look at our teams and go, okay, and sometimes, when I say serve people, it means, hey, I'm going to serve you by having, a hard conversation. Right. But it's really going to help you. It might hurt a little bit, but it's not going to harm you. And so really helping people feel understood. Sometimes it's inadequate support.
Yeah.
Right? Not being able to sort of support the person and really understand them could be poor communication.
Yeah.
And I think these are things that managers have to step back and go, okay, could have I added support a little bit better? And one question that we always ask people, because a lot of times, Lisa, people, will do something and I'll talk to managers and go, well, I'm just going to fire them. I go, oh, great. So let me ask you this question, right? Is, knowing what you know now, right? Would you rehire that person? Right. And many times when they say yes, I go, okay, well, I got to look back at me. Right. Because I would. Right.
Right. So then why am I going to fire them if I would hire them over again?
Yeah. Exactly.
And that says that it might not be about that person, but it might be about me and the organization if I would hire them over again.
Well, and a lot of times I want to keep some responsibility for myself. Right. Because I always want to be able to improve. Mm-hmm. Right. Now people will leave. Right. Some people are not going to be there forever. You might not be there forever. Right. There's this continuing moving and life changing. But I think here's what happens is a lot of times I see managers and they're just blaming team members.
Right.
Right. And they're putting all of the responsibility on them. And then the challenge is that we never learn and we never change.
Yeah.
Right. Or it could be micromanagement. Right. Nobody wants to be micromanaged. It could be lack of recognition. Right? It could be unclear expectations, stagnation. Now, one thing, Lisa, that we teach in this workshop, and we'll kind of, let you have like a behind the scenes peek, is this idea of the TSP framework. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we think about this idea of appreciation. When things appreciate, what do? They go up in value.
Right.
Right. When my property, my money appreciates, it goes up in value. But when I learn how to appreciate people, they actually go up in value to me. They become more valuable. And it's this idea.
I see them as more valuable and they see themselves as more valuable.
And they create more value, right? And I think it's this idea is that we always want to look at people as an investment, not a cost. And how many times do managers or leaders, we want to cut the cost, right? If you're a cost, then I just want to cut you. But if you're an investment, I want to go, hey, how can I make this investment grow? Yeah. I'm making this investment in this team member. How could I grow them to be even more valuable? And it's this idea of TSP framework. Okay, so Lisa, if I'm in the kitchen, and I see TSP, what do I think?
Teaspoon,
right? So it's not a tablespoon, not a cup, not a pint, not a gallon. It is small, right? And it's this idea of you create word stems. So a way to create a word stem is, hey, what I like, what I appreciate, what I find valuable. Hey, what's great about you, some kind of word stem, and just give it to them. Hey, Lisa, what I find really valuable about you is your precision. It really helps us. Right? It's not a long, like it's not a 2-minute conversation. It's just a teaspoon. Right? And you want a TSP, 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 TSP. Because then when it's time to maybe have a hard conversation, if I've already given you 10 TSPs, like you already know you're connected, right? You already know you're appreciated and valued, right? And then you can take that hard, maybe conversation a lot easier, right? Because what happens a lot of times is we do that sandwich conversation, right? It's here's something positive. I could bring my office and I start talking about how great you are. And in the back of your head, what are you thinking?
What's coming?
What's coming, right?
What shoe is going to drop?
The other shoe is going to drop, right? And then the shoe drops. And then do you remember anything I say at the end?
Typically not.
No, right? And it's not, and those conversations tend to take a while.
Yeah.
Right? But this is a way to...
Now, sometimes we have to have conversations like that.
Yes, absolutely.
But that is not the norm.
Yeah.
And along with the TSP, what's interesting about it is yes, it is a word stem. You know, Dennis, what I appreciate about you is that you are full of creative ideas that really increase my my vision and my dreaming. And so what that is TSP is truthful.
Yeah.
It's specific.
Yeah.
And it's positive.
TSP.
And that's why we call it TSP, because first of all, it's just a very little element. It's, you know, you only put a teaspoon of salt into something, whereas you might put a cup of flour in. So it's a very small element, but it's truthful. You know, it's specific and it's positive. Dennis, what I appreciate about you is, and it's very specific.
Because
and
that's the key.
You know, what I appreciate about you is you just got really good ideas. Does not fall as well as what I appreciate about you is you're just incredibly creative in these new concepts. Falls a whole lot better than I appreciate you got great ideas. And it also has to be positive. I mean, it can't be true and specific and be like, tear you down.
Right. And maybe the best analogy that we like to use is the golden rule. Right. And the typical golden rule is like doing to others as you want them to do unto you, which we totally apply and totally believe. But there's another golden rule. And it's this idea is that there's gold inside of every person. Right. And you see the value, you see the gold. Now, if I'm a miner and I'm going into mine for gold, am I focused on dirt or gold? I'm focused on gold.
Right.
But I know I'm going to have to like go through some dirt.
Going to have to go through a lot of dirt, tons and tons of dirt.
Right. And so I'm going to go through tons of dirt. But it's this idea is that you call the gold out. Right. And you find the gold and you start to call the gold out. So might be sorry. Let's call this podcast Be a Gold Digger.
Okay.
No, but it's that idea is that I always want to find the gold and call the gold out because people typically behave how you believe them to be. Right. And sometimes people have to borrow your belief. It's like, hey, I see this in you. I believe you can do that. At least, for example, we had a particular team member, and I just really encouraged her. I said, hey, this is a Zoom, and I want you to do this part of the Zoom training. Right? I'm not going to be there. You do this, and she had never done Zoom training. And I know she was scared. And I just coached her through it. And Lisa, do you remember the conversation we had after that Zoom training? Yeah. It was like she was on cloud 9.
Right. It's like, wow, that was so amazing. Yeah. And I loved it. And I had so much fun doing it.
Yeah. And it was basically, she just had to borrow our belief because there's something we saw in her and we called it out. Yeah. And listen, when you do that with people, the loyalty goes through the roof. Yeah. And you can make a lot of mistakes even. Right. And people will forgive you for them, but they won't forgive you for, not understanding them a little bit. I mean, they will forgive you, but there's certain things that you have to do as a leader that builds that loyalty. Okay. So people leave managers. These are something like, so just think through like lack of trust, inadequate support, poor communication, micromanagement, lack of recognition. Listen, what are you doing to really unlock employee loyalty? There's something that you can do, always something. Okay. So, and then the other idea is how do you create community?
Right.
And, because people, when there's a community element, right, I feel bonded to other people, not just to my manager, but how do we bond people to each other? It's this, need time outside of work to do this.
Right.
Right. I feel like, hey, this is my community. This is my group. This is my tribe. And our best clients, we have helped them do that.
Right. And we asked some of our clients, we were like, hey, what are some of the things that you've done to just really just bring just a good, valuable community within them? And what some of the things that they brought up, do you remember, like they were, they do a barbecue on their company grounds like once a month, or they, as the owner, go through and they really, really celebrate. They know when their families are having babies, and they know when their family members are, when the family members of the employees, so it's not even the employee, but the family members of the employees, when they're having a tough time, when they're struggling with their visas or, different things, and just being able to be real and be human with them.
Yeah, it's almost like when you know their passions and you're just a support in it, right? Because I know, Lisa, the best way to touch our hearts is to do something for our kids.
Absolutely. Right? And so one thing that we do with our team is, I think it's about every other month, we'll go through and we'll have them over to our house, and we bring in food. And
this is a no work zone.
Yes. So we preface it. It is a hard drawn boundary that we're not going to talk work. And so we'll have our team over, but we'll also have their families over and their kids over. And so we had one of our team members' spouses playing ball in the backyard with another team member's two little boys. Yeah. And the two boys and the spouse, it might have been an awkward situation because maybe they don't know everyone, but it was just really great. We all just played together and had fun together like we were human, and it wasn't, okay, this is a work event and we have to go do it.
Yeah, because, how could you make people like even help them? Like, I think the great value is like, these great teams have great community.
And for us, this is kind of a big deal because we are remote. Now, most of our team is local, but we're all remote. Or when we have team members come in, we'll do something. Now, one of our sons, he works for a company. So many of them are remote, and they had a half a week of team stuff going on in another city, in another state. They flew everyone in, and they had 3 days, and it wasn't, let's have a conference and let's talk about these things. It was a complete no work zone where they looked at bats, and they were on boats, and they were doing all of these different just fun things to build collaboration and build community. And that was time outside of work because they were all remote, and it's a pretty good sized team.
Yeah. So let me kind of give you the question, because this is the question in the workshop that we give people, because we come in and initially they bring us in to help them with retention. And really the question is not how do I increase retention? I think the real question is how do I increase employee loyalty? Right? Because if I can increase employee loyalty, retention kind of solves itself, right? It really kind of does. And, if you're asking the right question, you're going to get better answers.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you say, well, how do we increase retention? And then we work through all of this external things, and we spend all of this money, and then we're frustrated because it's still not solving the issue.
Yeah.
Right. And at its core is an idea of loyalty. And so, building community, a huge way to do that.
Right. And then also there's the friendly collaboration time within work.
Yeah.
So it's during regular time. We have some team members that they meet together at a coffee shop, and they just work together simultaneously in the same room on their own things. And, there's the water cooler talk if you're in office, but then there's also just being at each other's desks and chatting about something. And so it's just friendly collaboration. It's recognizing that we are each part of the same puzzle, doing it together individually as a group.
Yeah. At least one thing that we do is we start every meeting with a positive focus. Mm-hmm. We say, what's a positive focus personally, and what's a positive focus professionally? And people just share what they want to share.
Yeah.
Right. And it really gives us a glimpse into like who they are and what they're passionate about and what they care about. And it also allows us to kind of support them, celebrate with them when there's like a great personal win, because a lot of times, like when we do that personally, it helps create that loyalty and that bonding,
type
of thing. Listen, if if you've been a regular listener to the podcast, we'd love for you just to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts, because we really want to get the message out. And
even if you're not a regular listener and you just
be a regular listener, come on, what's the problem?
And you just enjoy kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Lisa, a couple other things, and you have something that...
So generational differences, generational differences are kind of a big deal on retention, because while some of the things we listed earlier on lack of recognition, micromanagement, poor communication, those are across the board humanity, we also are dealing with different generations. And we have depending on what your industry is, will also depend on what it looks like, but pretty much about 3% of the workforce are silents. Those are the oldest group. You've got 25% are boomers, about 33% are Gen X's, about 35% are millennials, and 5% are Gen Z's. And what you've got here is there are so many different things that happened in time during the formation of each of those groups
of people.
Their work concepts, the families they grew up, the values that were driven down into them. And so they're each, if your company doesn't address the needs of each of the different generations, then you're going to lose them. Now, and different generations are more accustomed to change than other generations. And it's typically the younger you go, the more accustomed to change you are, because the speed of change is happening so quickly. But if you understand, like boomers are incredibly team oriented. And you know what? They sacrifice for success, and they're motivated by loyalty. And those are the ones, how do you keep those boomers? You keep those boomers by asking them to be mentors, by respecting their wisdom and their life experience. Now, maybe they don't do everything the way you want them to be done, but you respect their life experience. Now, we can't say, that millennials or Gen Zers are motivated by loyalty, because they're not. It's a completely different mindset. So when we talk about building the loyalty within your group, you do it differently. You do it differently. We say loyalty because we're not a millennial and we're not a Gen Zer, but it's how you keep a family-oriented, passionate, driven, excited team toward a goal. So then you've got the Gen Xers. This is about 33% of the workforce, and you want to keep them. And really, they really value the flexibility. They value their independence. And what they really want is feedback and coaching. So if you're a millennial and if you have a Gen Xer under you, give them feedback and give them coaching. But it's different. It's a different type of feedback than, say, a millennial, because a millennial wants real-time feedback. Like, they want it right now. They don't want to wait for their quarterly review, which a Gen Xer might be okay with a quarterly review. They really want flexibility. But millennials, they're very purpose-driven and they're very civic-minded. And what they really want their autonomy. They do want their flexibility, just like Gen Xers want their flexibility, but they want their autonomy, and they want real-time feedback. Like, let me know right now. Let me know right now if I'm doing something that needs to be done differently. And then you've got your Gen Zers, and your Gen Zers, now right now it's about 5%, but it's going to be building. And also typically they're going to be your entry level, or they're also tend to be more highly educated. They also tend to be more diverse. And they just see the world differently, and they're very self-directed. They incredibly value their individuality, and they are highly aware. And so when you do things, if you're a Gen Xer and you do things and you're not aware, you're going to lose your Gen Zers. But how you'll lose your Gen Zers before anything else, you will lose your Gen Zers if the company's values don't align with their own. There's nothing you can do to keep them. So when you're hiring Gen Zers, like, I'll give an example. We know someone that is doing an internship right now with their degree at the university, and they had to choose who they were going to do an internship with. And they had multiple offers, and they were going through and they were choosing, do I want my internship with this company, with this company, with this company? And they opted for an internship that paid less, but that the culture was something that they enjoyed. They actually weren't going to get paid for their housing. They weren't going to get as much compensation, and there wasn't even necessarily as much room for advancement, but the culture of the company was something that they enjoyed. And they're not even going to stay in that company after they finish. And when they graduate, they're not even going to accept a position with them, but they wanted to do it for their internship, which is completely different than, say, a boomer, because they're going to sacrifice for success.
Yeah.
Whereas a Gen Zer's not.
Yeah, Lisa, that was so great. Thank you. That was like so, and I think that's what like our clients really appreciate when we talk about this workshop and retention, is that we talk about some of these things. And I think the key thing with all of that is that I don't want to put my expectations on you.
Right. And you've got to understand where the other person is coming from.
Yeah.
They're not just their life experience or their family situation or what part of the country they come from, but you have to consider what generation they are, because we are all so unique and we're such a Tetris puzzle.
Yeah.
And it makes us who we are. And it makes us what gives the value to the organization is all of the pieces of me and that I bring.
And we really have to challenge a lot of times boomers, because people say, well, they just don't want to work hard.
That is not true.
It is not true.
They are hard workers.
They're hard. All of them are hard workers, but they just work differently. It looks different. They have a different set of expectations. And so don't make some of those judgments, right? Because what that does is that kind of puts you in a box and you're not creative.
Yeah.
Right. When I'm making a judgment, I'm no longer curious and creative. And so you want to really stay creative. Now, Lisa, this is maybe the last thing that we want to kind of...
Oh, but this is so huge.
Okay. And you never think about it. And it's this idea that little things become big things.
Yes.
Now here's what we're talking about. Okay. Everybody, including you and me, we don't think we get paid enough. I have never met anybody that says, oh yeah, I make more than I really should. And
I can tell you millennials, really, they are always advocating for better benefits and better pay. It's just a characteristic.
Right. And so I think sometimes like that, yes, and people need to be compensated. We need to do the best we can and give them as much as, possible, because we want them to be blessed. But at the end of the day, it's like nobody ever thinks they make enough. So here's this idea is that if you can take care of the little things, it's almost the $100 fix that becomes the $5,000 reward. So here's some examples. These are
real-time examples, like real companies. This has really happened.
Right. Well, I just talked to a charge nurse last Thursday, and she explained that the barcode scanner at the front door was broken. It was literally like a $250 fix, right, to fix it.
And how long was it broken for?
It was broken for like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. And so they had to actually walk all the way around the hospital building and come in a separate entrance because they
couldn't scan themselves in.
And couldn't scan themselves in. Right. It's a tiny bit. And
that caused a lot of disgruntledness. That caused...
People were frustrated. They were irritated. Right. They didn't feel cared for. And it's literally a $250 fix.
Right.
They just didn't get around to it.
Yeah.
Right.
But when they go through and then they fix it, and then it's like, I'm actually appreciated. I'm not having to walk all the way around the building, every time I come into work or every time I come back from my lunch break.
Well, and what happens a lot of times, especially like with mid-level managers, they feel like, well, I can't pay people anymore. That's how much we can. But
I can fix a scanner.
Yeah. What else could I do?
I can get a $250 scanner approved by the budget team.
Yeah. Or, in the break room, we had a particular client that the microwave was broken in the break room
for a year.
For a year. Come on, it's $100 fix, right?
And these guys would come in and they'd bring their lunches, and they couldn't warm their lunches up, so they'd have to eat it cold, or they would have to go and they would have to buy like those thermos things and have their lunch hot, or they just have to know that they had to pack something that was going to have to be eaten cold. And for a year, they had this microwave that was broken. And these guys are like trying to relax, and they're trying to eat their lunch, and they're trying to rejuvenate so they can, put more gas on the fire, and they can't. And so just the joy that this owner of the company had from his employees when he replaced the microwave, you would have thought that they had won some city award. It was just phenomenal.
Yeah. So it's this idea, little things become big things.
$100 fixes.
$100 fixes. And you start to multiply that, and then people leave. They go, well, they just don't care about me. Right. But they have this list of like $100 fixes that could have happened over the last couple of years.
And honestly, sometimes we as owners, as C-suite, we don't even know what the $100 fixes are. We don't even know that the microwave's broken because we don't use that break room. Yeah. And so that's going through, and that's talking to the managers, that's talking to your people and saying, hey, is there anything that we could do that would just make it easier for you? Or is there anything that I need to know that maybe isn't working? And just getting their feedback and hearing from them.
Yeah, because so many times, like, we talk to managers or leaders and they feel helpless. Like, well, we can't pay people anymore. But listen, there's always something you can do. Right? You are not helpless. There's always something you can do.
You can't give them a raise, but you could sure write them a handwritten note. Or you could, honestly, you could get out a $5 coffee gift card.
Yeah. And so just think about like instead of like, how do I improve intention, turn the question around and how do I create employee loyalty? Because that's going to solve.
Or how do I make my employees feel appreciated?
Yeah. Just start to change the question. Right? Because then you start to get to the heart of it. Listen, if you need some more help with this, this is a workshop that we deliver for a lot of organizations. So just reach out to us. But one thing we want to give you is the Focus Team Challenge, the Results Focus Team Challenge. It's a 5-day challenge, 5 quick tools. We're going to put a link, but just click on it and subscribe to it. You're going to get 5 videos over the next 5 days, 5 tools, like 2-minute videos that are going to make your leadership easier and a little bit more simpler and really kind of unlock some of that employee.
What are some of the topics in that?
How to create a sense of urgency, how to delegate with clear guidelines.
Wow.
Right? So just very simple tools that you can take and just use right away. Right? You can use it right away. You'll get the concept in 2 minutes, and then you'll be able to take the tool. And listen, the tool is yours forever. Okay, just take the tool. You'll use it over and over and over again. And we didn't want to charge for it. We just wanted to be a blessing and really serve you, in a great way.
Take it, use it, and make your organization better.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, like, subscribe, whatever you do, on these podcasts. But Lisa, I was just thinking about like, what's the takeaway? And I think for me, I always want to think about like, hey, I think that question, how do I increase loyalty? Right, with people, what are things that I can do? Because I think there's some things maybe that I'm missing at times that I can do to really create loyalty and really step back and like look at my own leadership. So it's very introspective and super helpful.
Yeah. And for me, I changed that because personally, I don't really like the term, how do I increase loyalty? Because I feel like that's all about me. But I think of it as, how do I increase others feeling appreciated, and others, how do I increase the people that work for us? How do I increase them being seen?
Yeah, that is super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, our time is done, and we'll see you next time on the Drama Free Living Podcast.